welcome to This Old Neighborhood. I'm Al Armstrong, one of 9 Indianapolis Historic Preservation Commission members. I'm here today to show you a little bit about what the Commission does and a lot about one specific neighborhood. In the next half hour, I'm going to take you along as we take a look inside the Old North Side. The Old North Side is one of the city's 8 designated historic area districts under the jurisdiction of the Indianapolis Historic Preservation Commission. Since we are in a historic area, we need to know something of the history of this district. Each historic neighborhood has its own distinguishing characteristics, shaped by geography, historical events, and people. With us here in front of the Benjamin Harrison home is Dr. George Geib, fellow Preservation Commission member and professor of history at Butler University. Hi, George, and
Howdy.
Thanks for being with us. Would you share with our viewing audience, George, a brief overview of the Old North Side, its origins, its history, and its unique place as a member of the Indianapolis community?
Well, it's hard to believe that when they laid out the city of Indianapolis, their original assumption was the city could never grow more than a mile away from the monument. And yet within a generation of its founding, Indianapolis is breaking out of the mile square into a series of new suburban neighborhoods that open. Come out here to the Old North Side, which is one of the best preserved of those new suburbs, you have a sense of what people thought life could be like in the 1850s and 60s and for generations then beyond. If you ask today, of course, what's the special character of the Old North Side, you start with people. Associations like Benjamin Harrison, whose home is one of the anchors of the district, Meredith Nicholson, whose House of 1,000 Candles is one of the show places, or any one of 100 other residents who in different ways shaped and gave character to the neighborhood. But if you ask the character, you also ought to look at the architecture. Not just the individual buildings that are beautiful examples of mid and late 19th century development, but the feel of neighborhood and community that the area was able to develop. The sense of being not only part of Indianapolis, but of being itself a livable place. And I think that theme of being a livable area is what today has made the Old North Side one of the attractive regions of the city that's once again attracting population to it, becoming once more a part of the Indianapolis community as its planners over 100 years ago had hoped it would always be.
Thank you, George. I'll be getting back with you later on as we continue our look inside the Old North Side. The surviving architecture today hints at what the Old North Side was like when it was the new North Side, filled with the city's most fashionable residences. Waiting for us at the Butler House is preservation historian William Selm. Bill, help us understand the functioning of the Indianapolis Historic Preservation Commission and how it helps to preserve public spaces.
The Preservation Commission functions as a regulatory agency within the framework of local government. The commission, well, you're a commissioner, they're one of 9 commissioners. There is a staff which supports the commission in its decision-making process. The people who live in the Old North Side, or rather those who own property, come in for to get approval for their certificates of appropriateness, which is a type of permit. Our agency really functions as a permit agency and a planning agency, of course, with the emphasis being on the historic structures and historical character of whole historic areas. The objective is to preserve historic structures and characters, the fabric and so on, at the same time allowing a certain amount of changes, as long as those changes do not disrupt that historical significance of an area.
And so, Bill, the overriding purpose of the Indianapolis Historic Preservation Commission is to preserve the historical character and fabric of the districts in which it has jurisdiction. Now, Bill, would you tell me about the architectural part, what kind of houses and what's unique about them in the Old North Side area?
The Old North Side is filled with very good examples of residential architecture of the late 19th century and very early 20th century. The buildings here in the district range from the 1860s and go up to the early part of the 20th century. Of course, you just came from the Benjamin Harrison house. Benjamin Harrison lived there, and the house was finished in 1875. It's a very fine example of the Italianate style. that is a house museum. We're standing right in front of the other house museum of the Old North Side. This is the Butler House. This house is one of the finest examples in Indianapolis, not the only, but one of the finest and few of the style we called a Second Empire style. And this style of architecture was popular in France during the reign of Napoleon III, hence the name Second Empire. Has many features to it, similar to the Italianate. However, the hallmark characteristic of the style is the mansard roof. And in the case of this building, the Butler House, it also has a tower, a very distinctive tower with a mansard roof as well. And this becomes then a real gateway into the Old North Side. It's seen by everyone traveling on the interstate.
There are more than house museums in the Old North Side.
Oh, certainly. There are. The district is filled with buildings where people live and work and worship. And it has many different types of housing as far as we have apartment buildings, many apartment buildings. We have some subsidized housing, as well as single-family houses, condominiums, doubles. You name it, there's a wide range of it here.
Bill, thanks for being a part of our program today. Now that we have had an opportunity to learn some about the history, the architecture, and the preservation of the Old North Side, let's go and meet some of the people who live and work in this community and whose efforts have greatly helped for the preservation of the homes and buildings in the Old North Side district area. I know you're eager to get going, and so am I. We're here now with a long-term resident of the Old North Side, Mr. Cal Legg. Cal is also the president of the Old North Side Neighborhood Association. Cal, thank you for being a part of our show today. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Al.
I understand that you've preserved, how many houses is it, Cal?
Well, actually, I've worked on 4 houses, Al.
Is that right?
Yes, 4.
Over how long a period of time is that?
About 9 years.
Is that right?
Yes.
Boy, that's fabulous. Cal, let me know, tell me about the neighborhood association that you're president of, and what's its role in the neighborhood?
Well, the Old North Side Neighborhood Association is open to all people who live or own property in the Old North Side. You don't have to be a property owner, you can be a renter. And our purpose is simply to, first of all, make sure that the neighborhood gets eventually restored, and also to be a basis or kind of a network, if you will, for the people to restore their homes, and also to come together socially and culturally to make a more unified neighborhood.
How has Indianapolis Historic Preservation Commission affected the Old North Side neighborhood over the years that you've been here?
Well, they've affected us quite a bit. As you may be aware of, in the early days, many of these grand homes, like what we're standing in front of here today, were torn down simply because of quote-unquote progress. Obviously, we don't see it that way. But since the commission has come in and we have now a preservation plan, we do not see these beautiful historic structures being torn down anymore. And also, it serves as a maintainer, if you will, to make sure that these places are restored in a sensitive manner and it fits in with the overall plan for our community.
What caused you to first move here to the Old North Side neighborhood?
Well, actually, my first calling to this neighborhood was actually the homes itself. Because the homes are so beautiful, they're so substantial, and you really won't find homes like this anywhere else in Indianapolis, not in this number. But after I got down here, it was more the people that made me stay a part of this neighborhood. The people in this neighborhood are great. They're from all different walks of life, different varieties of people, and it's a real diverse metropolitan type community that we have here in the Old North Side.
That's wonderful. I understand that this beautiful house is one of the first houses that you had done. What caused you to pick this particular house to restore?
Well, first of all, the house is very intriguing. It is a Jacobean Revival style house. It was built in 1898, and the house itself is just intriguing because you don't find this type of revival style normally being that old. But the architecture, I think, is fascinating. It's an old house, but it has a feel of a more modern house, like from the 20s, because of the French and English influence in the house. But it's a grand place.
What do you think is one of the major advantages to people who might be moving into the neighborhood today?
I would think the main advantage, other than the cultural diversity that I spoke of earlier, is the actual quality of life here is growing by leaps and bounds. Early in, people did not think of downtown as being a place where they may have wanted to live and raise a family. That has changed 360 degrees. It is now becoming a preferred place to live, to be close to your office, to your work, to be a part of the cultural events that are growing by leaps and bounds in Indianapolis, and to be a part of the overall growth that we see in our center city. This is the place to be to take advantage of all of that.
Well, thank you very much for being a part of our program today, Cal.
Thank you,
We look
Al.
forward to the opportunity to look throughout the entire neighborhood and meet other people who are restoring homes here in the Old North Side. Cal Legg has shown us what it's like to be involved in the neighborhood association. That's a very important part of any neighborhood, but especially here in the Old North Side, where neighbors exchange information about restoration techniques, block parties, and neighborhood cleanups. We're about to see a house that's very different than Cal Legg's, and that's the house of Larry Blazak, who has lived in the neighborhood for about 10 years. Larry, thanks for being on our show today. We're pleased to have you open your house and let us take a look. Can you tell us a little about the history of your home?
As far as I know, Al, this house was built in 1866 as a wedding present for Damia Butler, the daughter of Ovid Butler of Butler University fame.
Is that?
Yes, and it's been added on to several times, once in 1886, once about 1910, and again in about 1912. And we're trying to bring it back to approximately the 1886 version.
Now that would make it one of the first houses in the neighborhood, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
Now I understand that your front of your house has changed quite dramatically recently. Can you tell us what happened here?
Well, it's certainly changed. It's unveiled a little more of the Victorian character of the front facade. There was a porch added about 1912, a massive yellow brick structure that covered the front of the house halfway up the front facade, and we've taken that off, and you can see now the limestone below and the original small portico front porch, or at least the vestiges of there.
Do you plan on putting a porch back at some time?
Yes, yes, we're going to come as close as we can to installing what was there in 1886.
Now I understand that you bought this house about 10 years ago and,
That's right.
and started and then kind of left it for a while. And what caused you to decide to come back and take the project back up again?
Well, we've all seen what's going on downtown. I've wanted to restore this house, of course, ever since I bought it. And it finally occurred to me that if this were going to be done in my lifetime, it was going to be done by crews of people who know what they're doing. And so we're back now, redoubling the effort, and hope to start in earnest in the spring.
Excellent. Can you tell us a little bit about how a Historic Preservation Commission has helped you in the process of your restoration of your house?
Yes, they actually worked with me on the removal of this front porch. It turns out that we were able to determine that the porch was actually pulling the front facade of the house forward. You can see cracks around the windows and whatnot. You can also see where the massive brick porch had been keyed into the building. And we decided that the historic fabric of the house would not have been altered substantially by removing the latter-day front porch in order to save the 1886 facade.
Good.
We're also looking at putting an addition on the back, and we worked with the commission on that to design some extra living space that would be sensitive to the old part of the house, but not in any way purport to look like something that might have been built in 1866.
Possibly we can take a look inside Larry's house. Larry, during the construction process, did you find any evidence of previous owners or previous occupants who had lived in the house?
Yes, we did, Al. We found long bobby pins from the useful in the old style hairdos. We found a corset hook. We found a photograph in nearly perfect condition, probably one of the early owners of the house, and a union card in a leather case, a bricklayer from 1893.
Oh, that's fabulous. Well, thank you very much, Larry, for making your house available for us and being a part of our show today.
It's been a pleasure, Al.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to look at a very different house. The Samper Jamison house is directly across the street from Larry Blazak's home. This beautiful example of a brick Victorian Gothic Revival house was built in 1876 by Dr. Patrick Jamison. Dr. Jamison lived here until his death in 1910. The house was then occupied by a carpenter, James Morris, from 1921 until 1950. The house is currently occupied by Ferd and Nancy Samper, and we're going to go inside and talk to the Sampers right away. Now we're in the formal parlor with Ferd and Nancy, and I want to thank you for being on our show today. Ferd, tell me, any surprises in the renovation of your home, and how long did the renovation of this house take?
Well, we bought the house approximately 1 year ago. I really got started around November 1988, really working, and just like 2 weeks ago got done with the inside of it. So it took about 10 months to renovate the inside of the house. As far as surprises, well, actually all the wiring had to be redone, all the plumbing had to be redone, all the windows, and there were quite a few windows in this house had to be taken out, new glass put in, put back in, so the house is fairly airtight now.
Sounds like a real big job.
It's been a big job, but we really enjoyed it.
Now, Nancy, let me ask you, with Ferd being a successful attorney and you owning your own business, you all could have chosen anywhere in Indianapolis to live, and yet you picked a home in a historic district, and specifically in the Old Northside. Why did you choose to live here?
We fell in love with the house the first time we saw it, and we like to entertain, and it allows us the space to do it. It's a grand old house. It's close to our business. We spend most of our time downtown, and it's just convenient for us.
That sounds great. Not all of the homes in the Old Northside are old. Some are really quite new. Let's talk to Todd Mazingo about new construction in the Old Northside neighborhood. Todd is an architect and has been a long-term resident of the Old Northside, who can speak to our questions about design in a historic district. Todd, thanks for being on our program. As an architect, are there a lot of guidelines and restrictions on design in a historic area?
The guidelines which have been established by the Indianapolis Historic Preservation Commission are really only the same standards which would be applied by any architect or designer who is trying to respond to the context of a given neighborhood. They relate to things such as the size of the building, scale or massing, that would be called, the spacing of the building on the street. Do we have freestanding individual houses, row housing? Do we have a sort of solid wall of buildings, or buildings which are building and then a space or a void building, a space or a void, those kind of things, as well as the setback from the street. All of these things go together to create a sort of general shape and form of buildings which are consistent with what was here historically.
Todd, in addition to establishing guidelines, what else is the role of the Indianapolis Historic Preservation Commission as it pertains to new construction in the historic area?
Well, in addition to really providing assistance, which they do, they have a professional staff which will assist owners, developers, individuals if they need that assistance. They also serve as a watchdog as well. As in, they are a regulatory agency, as with zoning or any other agency. And whenever anyone has to deal with a regulatory agency, I believe they tend to feel that they're in the way. But whenever the regulatory agency helps your side out to keep something from happening which is undesirable, you're glad to have them around.
Todd, has there been an evolution of design in the Old Northside since it was first put on the National Register in 1979?
Yes, there certainly has. All historic neighborhoods seem to go through a pattern of sort of evolution, going from initial concerns of, yes, this may be this is a potentially wonderful neighborhood of nice old buildings, to trying to stop the demolition or destruction of historic buildings, to reversing that process, to ultimately moving on to concern oneself with proper restoration of historic buildings, proper design of new construction, neighborhood services, the whole long progression of things that go into make a neighborhood a neighborhood.
Not all of the problems in the Old North Side have been able to be solved with new wood, nails, paint, and plaster. Certainly, homelessness has been a major issue of concern in cities across the country for a number of years. The Old North Side is no exception. With me today is attorney Marion Redstone, who is a neighbor and resident of the Old North Side Historic District and is quite familiar with the issue of homelessness in the Old North Side, having participated in resolving that issue here today. Marion, share with us a little bit about what has been some of the issues that have concerned homelessness and issues that are concerned here in the Old North Side.
Al, the thing to remember is that when the historic district was designated, there had been about 30 years of disinvestment that had made this area a melting pot of social issues. The disinvestment led to high-density housing within the private sector, and the previous well-to-do parishioners from the various big churches all went north. So the thought was, what do we do with these big buildings that aren't good enough to tear down? And we started meeting a series of social issues. Over at 15th and Delaware, for instance, the Metro Center has adult and child daycare. The United Methodist, Central Avenue United Methodist Church, I think you're going to talk to Reverend Walters later, has been a methadone clinic at one time, and now it's moved out, and still it serves as one of the facilities for Midtown mental health. The Talbot House over on Central has been serving alcoholics for 25 years. This building back here, of course, is the result of a 1970s decision by the Indianapolis Episcopal Diocese to serve social needs.
As a long-term resident of the neighborhood, what do you think the neighbor's position is at this time as it relates to Dayspring now that it's been in operation for a little while?
Can't speak for all the neighborhood. Dayspring, in fact, operated off-site here for a while, and this facility's been running about 60 days from when we talk here. I sense a calmness about it. The people are doing what they said they would do. Dayspring's doing what they said they would do, and the neighbors are not trying to look for trouble either. I think that's the other side of it.
As you saw in the beginning of this program, political figures have always played an important part in the Old North Side. While we don't have a president living in the neighborhood now, we're honored to have Lieutenant Governor Frank O'Bannon as a resident in the Old North Side area. We're very pleased today to be in the home of Lieutenant Governor and Mrs. Frank O'Bannon. Thank you very much for opening your home for our show today. We're very pleased and honored to be here. And welcome to Indianapolis. You're certainly a long way from Corydon. And I've got to say, Frank, I'm very pleased that you've chosen, instead of moving the state capital back to Corydon, to move here to Indianapolis instead. But let me ask you, if I may, Judy, just for a moment, with all of the communities in Indianapolis that you might have moved into, what caused you to choose a historic district, and what caused you to choose the Old North Side to live in?
Well, Frank and I have been interested in restoring buildings for a long time. We've restored a federal-style building that houses our newspaper in Corydon, and an 1800 log cabin that now is our home when we go home on weekends. From that interest, we began to get involved in the Main Street program, which is economic development and historic preservation, and I'm now the chairman of that council for the state program, and we have about 101 communities that are doing the same thing that you're doing here in Indianapolis, but on a small scale. We're trying to restructure our downtown so they're livable, usable places for people, so we save our old buildings and we don't lose them, and we maintain our heritage. It gives the community a sense of place and who they are, and we think that's important.
That's fabulous. I'm pleased that you're as interested in preservation. That's marvelous. Lieutenant Governor, let me ask you, what is the state's role in historic preservation?
Well, the state's had a long history of preserving historical buildings and a sense of history of the past, such as the old First State Capitol building in Corydon, the Lanier Mansion in Madison, and the New Harmony community. And as we know, that sense of community and pride, which is the state of Indiana, is very important to be preserved, and it adds to the quality of life, which includes economic development and tourism in the state of Indiana.
That's it. Mr. and Mrs. Bannon, again, thank you very much for opening up your home for our visit today. We appreciate it very much. We're going to be going over to Central Avenue United Methodist Church, where I understand you two attend now that you've moved into the neighborhood.
Yes, we certainly do, and it's one of the reasons we wanted to move into the Old Northside. The church and its facilities is a cohesive central meeting place for the neighborhood, and will help to revitalize it and the community that it represents.
Well, thank you very much. Let's now go over and see Reverend Bob Walters over at Central Avenue United Methodist Church. This landmark that we stand before has been a Methodist church since 1877. Central Avenue United Methodist Church has been here since the building was built in 1891. This landmark's Romanesque tower is clearly visible by all who drive north on 65 or drive south on Central on the way into downtown. Here with me now is the pastor of Central Avenue United Methodist Church, Reverend Bob Walters. Bob, thanks for joining us on our program today. We're real pleased to be here with you.
Welcome to Central Avenue.
Bob, tell me about your congregation here at Central Avenue, and what's your congregation like?
Al, our present congregation is made up of a faithful remnant, some of whom have been members here for 40 years or more. But that remnant has been augmented by some new growth. We have new members who live in the downtown neighborhoods, especially in the Old North Side.
For having us in your church. I understand not only are you the minister here at Central Avenue, but you also live in the neighborhood. What is it like, Bob, to have a landmark as a worship space?
Well, having this particular landmark as a worship space is a real joy. This church, built in 1891, but the floor plan here, the architectural design fits our 20th century worship and even into the 21st century.
With us today is the president of Historic Landmarks Foundation, Reed Williamson. The foundation was established in 1960 by Mr. Eli Lilly to assist in the preservation of many of the historic landmarks in the state of Indiana. Reed's going to share with us a part about a program developed to preserve historic houses in the Old North Side area. Reed, thanks for being on our program today.
My pleasure.
Would you tell us a little bit about FLIP, what it is, and when it started?
Yes, actually the forerunner of FLIP was the Old Northside Revolving Fund. And the Old Northside Revolving Fund was started in 1976, in the year of the bicentennial. And this project that we're standing in front of, the Talbot House, was the first project of the Old Northside Revolving Fund.
I see.
The fund's operation is to buy buildings that are threatened or in jeopardy, either of demolition or of disintegration by through no use, and then stabilize those buildings and then resell them to owner occupants who will restore them under the guidelines that FLIP sets forth for each historic building.
How many homes or buildings has FLIP preserved or stabilized in the Old North Side area?
In the Old North Side, some 25 to 30 units of property. And all told now, both the Old North Side Revolving Fund, the forerunner of FLIP, and FLIP, including the Lockerbie project, have done nearly 125 properties.
In the 10 years since the Old Northside was designated as a historic district, great progress has been made in its preservation, as you have seen in this program. However, the challenge of the future is great in maintaining this neighborhood as an important part of the historical fabric of the Indianapolis community. George, do you have any parting comments for the group here today?
Well, I think the message of the Old North Side, like the message of all of our other historic districts, is ultimately a message of livable places. Places that were built in the past as residences for our community, places that can still form that residential function today. But in the sense of being places, they also become part of a larger place, the city of Indianapolis, which itself is a wonderfully livable place today.
Thank you, George, and thank you for being a part of our program today. In other shows, we want to share with you information about the 7 other historic districts under the jurisdiction of the Indianapolis Historic Preservation Commission. Thanks for being a part of this old neighborhood.